In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World. The big 6-0, Jerry. Episode 60.
Wow.
Andrew and Jerry were right all along. And let me start this off, Jerry, by saying this, because everybody else on podcasts do this as well. If you're watching us, you can always catch us wherever fine podcasts are pervade, whether it's Spotify and Amazon Music or Podbean or Apple Podcasts or wherever. If you're listening to us, you can also check out our gorgeous visages on YouTube. Just go ahead and look up Andrew and Jerry Save the World on YouTube, and you will find us. Jerry, we hit a major milestone.
Yes.
I'm not going to say the number, but we hit a very big number in terms of podcasts a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you to our listeners.
Thank you all for that very much. Listen, I'm glad we're doing this today. And it's the benefits of doing this. I was sort of bemoaning the fact that I wasn't on the radio yesterday.
You're bemoaning?
I was bemoaning. Yes, I was bemoaning.
Oh.
I was bedazzled too. But
as long as you're not bewaring.
Yes,
or
or bewildered.
Oh, yes.
Or bewitched.
Or coming before the end.
Yes, that's putting the cart before the horse. Anyway,
yes.
The point is, listen, there's a lot going on. And the point of this being Andrew and Jerry were right all along. And this, I want to continue to talk about, we spent a lot of time talking about the gaslighting of America. And we got the Durham report on Monday evening, and it confirmed really the worst of all of our suspicions, and not even our suspicions, but what we had been saying throughout the first 3 years of the Trump administration. And you pointed out something to me yesterday on the phone, Jerry, and I want you to start off with that.
Well, again, the Democrats have been pushing this narrative that the January 6th riots, the mob attack on the Capitol, was a threat, an attack equal to Pearl Harbor,
right,
equal to the 9/11 attacks, right, calling it an insurrection, a coup d'etat, all the rest of it. And it's untrue. And what happens is they're overplaying their hand here with a compliant media. Actually diminishes the mob attack, right? The founding fathers were fearful of mob rule, but at the end of the day, it wasn't an insurrection, it wasn't a rebellion, but rather a mob attack, and they shut down congressional business for a couple, 3-4 hours.
Right.
The Durham report lets us confirms.
Wait, before we get to what the Durham report confirms. The Republic was never in any danger. That's the key thing here. It wasn't
J6. The J6
on January 6th.
There was no threat to the continuation of the Republic.
QAnon shaman. It's not that if you get into the speaker's office and you're sitting behind the speaker's chair, all of a sudden you're Speaker of the United States.
Right. And also remember, let's be accurate. He was escorted in.
Well, but no. But my point is the goal being, right, if the goal was an insurrection, the Republic was never in any danger because
correct.
In the end, Joe Biden was going to be certified as president of the United States,
regardless.
That was going to be happening. That being said, and this sets it up for what the Durham report shows and why there was this massive difference here. Donald Trump was elected president and was, I'm sorry, Jerry, immediately delegitimized through this process. Go ahead.
And right, and then the Durham report confirms that the Democrats, the Biden, the Obama Biden administration, the FBI, the DOJ, the government essentially handicapped and put in jeopardy the legitimacy and the government of Donald Trump. Whether you like Trump or not,
right?
He was elected. And what's worse, this thing starts early, right?
Yes.
This thing starts with Hillary Clinton and her campaign, high figures in her camp. John Podesta, for crying out loud, former, Clinton administration official. They made up a story about Russian collusion, sold it to the CIA, to the FBI, to the Department of Justice, to the Obama Biden administration, and they allowed for it, knowing that there was no evidence.
Right, and this is where this is
a real coup, by the way.
Right, and that's exactly it. It gets into exactly when you you balance these things, and yet what is in the popular mindset? January 6th was the insurrection, and that this is, I don't know, just politics as usual, or we're overblowing it, right? What did the New York Times say yesterday? That they called the Durham report essentially a nothing burger, and I know we used
so did MSNBC and Joe Scarborough, so did Fox.
Let's talk about the history here. So,
but I have a question real quick for you.
Please.
Regardless of your political persuasion, how is it a nothing burger? Like, how could the New York Times justify that?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, because again, they have to admit culpability, and they refuse. They will never admit their culpability. Jonah Goldberg yesterday, who had an ample opportunity to say, you know something, I was wrong. Instead, took the opportunity to create additional pot shots at his detractors. But I want to go back, and I want to go back a little bit through history here, and let's talk about exactly what happened, and because it is. The timeline here is incredible to me. So the Clinton campaign knows that they are under serious investigation. Again, not for the things that I would have investigated them for corruption at the State Department, but for Hillary Clinton's actions in terms of classified material and in terms of the home-baked server. They know they're under investigation here, right? So this is the spring of 2016. So they go out and they hire this firm called Fusion GPS, or Perkins Coie, their law firm goes out and hires Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS brings on a former CIA case officer by the name of Nellie Orr, someone who had great credentials within the intelligence community. She, in turn, is tasked with running a former British spy named Christopher Steele, who's got great contacts behind, well, I would have said behind the Iron Curtain, but essentially what we would have called 30, 40 years ago behind.
So let me interrupt, continue, but let me just make a point here.
Yeah.
So foreign influence on the 2016 election happened.
Right.
And it originated and was promoted and paid for by the Clinton campaign.
Now, let's add to this. The Russian FSB, the successor to the KGB, they have been involved in terms of trying to influence American politics for decades. The KGB transitioned to the FSB, it's the same thing. The point, and Putin being a former KGB a Chekist, as they would call him, someone part of the secret police, he continued this. And one of the ways that they have always done this, and this gets into some of the greater issues I think you and I are going to talk about in this show, Jerry, which is about the issue of Russians interfering. Anyway, the point is, the Clinton campaign, they decide they are going to see what kind of dirt they can get from Russia. They hire this spy. He is dangled all of this dirt from Russia, and they accept it whole hog. And because they've got this CIA operative, oh, by the way, Jerry, whose husband is a senior DOJ official, who can run this stuff over to people like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. And here's the thing. Understand that at the time, this is like something out of a John le Carré spy novel, Jerry. You have a presidential candidate who knows she is being investigated by the FBI, by the DOJ. So what does she do? She goes and dangles the shiny object in front of the DOJ and FBI. You know, hey, don't look at me, look at my opponent. Jerry, remember, we get into late June, early July. Bill Clinton, former president of the United States, has a meeting with the Attorney General of the United States, a secret meeting on the tarmac in Phoenix. This sounds like a conspiracy theory. Now, we don't know what the substance of that meeting was. Could it be that he was saying, hey, go easy on my wife? Or could it be that Bill Clinton was saying, hey, by the way, Attorney General, we got all this stuff here that we're learning about Donald Trump.
Right. And again, the bottom line on that meeting is it was inappropriate, should have been investigated, should have been bigger news. Look, let me just add this.
Please add
to this.
I'm going to mute my mic and yell to my daughters for a minute. So go ahead.
So news that the IRS ousted its entire team probing the Hunter Biden investigation.
Yeah.
Right. And they did this according to some reports to sideline a whistleblower.
Right.
Right. This comes the same day as the Durham report on massive Justice Department malfeasance promoting Russiagate, that smear. Right. Now, listen.
And the day after James Comer says, I've lost track of the whistleblower. Go ahead.
And then, and again, there's only one conclusion here. That is, much of the federal government is now permanently weaponized to protect Democrats and to undermine their enemies.
So the point is, moving into all of this, when we talk about this issue and how this undermines it, because there is this great interplay between the Democrats and the media swallows up what the Democrats are telling them whole hog. This is where you get into, right before the election, the stories about the Alpha Bank being the Trump connections to Alpha Bank, meetings that Manafort is having with Russians about giving them polling numbers. All of these stories start to drop because they think that they can put the nail in the coffin of Donald Trump's election. And of course, remember the famous words in the text message between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok: we need to create an insurance policy against Donald Trump getting elected. And guess what? They created that insurance policy, and they enacted it.
And what's so disheartening is a complete lack of curiosity from the mainstream media. This is the biggest political scandal, legal scandal, constitutional crisis scandal in our history. There is no other event in our history. I'd say this, that what Barack Obama, Joe Biden, the FBI, James Comey, the DOJ, what they did, the Clinton campaign, all of their allies, the media, that together is worse than 9/11. Worse than the Civil War.
Let's talk about this, and it's interesting because you normally are the one who pushes back on me when I say that something is. You're not. I don't think you're saying that it's unintentional, but you say that it's a lack of curiosity. I don't think it's a lack of curiosity. I think it is now. We have a media with an agenda.
You are right.
I know, yes,
but you're right about that. You're 100% correct. So yes, the New York Times, CNN, and again, the major mainstream media, you're right. They're part of my point. They're part of the weaponization. But when I say
here's my
finish my point.
Oh, okay.
The lack of curiosity comes with the local radio stations, the local papers, local news. A lot of this is trickled down, and we hear it where you live, where I live. You put on your local news, they're talking about this, but they're just reporting it in a way. A Durham report is released. Democrats Democrats say it's bunk. Republicans say it's trouble, and then that's the report.
Right, and this gets into what we've talked about in terms of the coverage of Westmore, among others. Just to stick on this issue. Imagine if the clearest relationship that this has is to Watergate. And what Nixon and the Nixon team tried to do in terms of manipulating the election of 1972. Nixon had it in the bag, yet he was doing these things anyway. Imagine if Nixon had the media on his side, and that Nixon was behind the eight ball going into 72, and had turned the election in his favor, when he was behind the eight ball. I mean, that's the key difference here. Or if Nixon wasn't elected, if somehow the intelligence community and the FBI and law enforcement had then turned around and tried to undermine George McGovern or undermine Gerald Ford even. This is what we're talking about here. This is the worst kind of political conspiracy theorizing made manifest in a way that literally it's a situation in which immediately upon, right, you had sorry, Jerry, you had the immediate attacks on the legitimacy of the election in 2016. Then you had the FBI interfering with the operations of an already chaotic White House. We understand this. And then every single week, it was a new kind of scandal. It was either, Donald Trump is a racist, Donald Trump is mentally incapacitated, Donald Trump is a Russian asset. And
again, Adam Schiff, who was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, a Democrat, right, California, he claimed to have seen evidence linking Trump with Russia. Why is Adam Schiff? Why isn't he being investigated? Why isn't Hillary Clinton? These people are still on CNN, McCabe from the FBI, Brennan, right, from the CIA, Podesta from the Clinton campaign. Is it because our politics is so broken, our public discourse is so broken that truth no longer matters?
Well, but it gets back to exactly what you're saying, which is the legacy media and the legacy media not doing its job. The First Amendment exists so that the media is protected from being, when they go out and rightfully investigate or question what is happening in government. It's why when I had my conversation with Bob Levy on the other podcast, a couple of weeks back, Bob Levy, who is an old school progressive, old school liberal, Bob Levy says the threat to the First Amendment is one of the biggest issues in America. The problem, of course, is when the press refuses to do its job, and then the outlets that are doing their job get attacked or marginalized. That's the issue, right? Jerry and I get I don't consider me and Jerry to be journalists per se. Jerry probably more so than me because he edits Real Clear Policy.
But I said this to you, Andrew, and I want offline, but I want to get your reaction.
Yeah.
During the show, and that is, I blame partly for all of this mess Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, yes,
and what I mean by that is not his character failings, not his idiotic ramblings, his stupid statements he makes to the press or on CNN. Not what he says about women. No. And I understand the establishment was against him. The media was against him, right? They had fortified even the 2020 election to collude to steal from him any re-election hopes. I get all that. And by the way, that's true.
Yeah.
They rigged the 2016 election. The Durham report shows that. They then delegitimized and crippled his presidency. Right. The Durham report confirms that. And also, we know, again, not from Donald Trump, but from Time magazine and other mainstream, they were so proud of themselves in rigging the 2020 election, they couldn't help themselves but gloat about it. And you can look it up yourself,
right,
about the fortification, how the mainstream media, how the corporate culture, how the Democrats and the establishment and the anti-Trumpers colluded to fortify the election so Trump would not win re-election. It was rigged. Pennsylvania, we know what happened there, in other states, illegally changing laws, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the thing. I still blame Donald Trump because he is so chaotic. He is so stupid. And I don't know what else to say, but just dumb and ignorant. He doesn't know what he doesn't know and doesn't care. And he never fought back appropriately. Like, for instance, the 2020, he's on CNN. He's talking about ballot boxes being stuffed. That's nonsense. It's been debunked. It's not true.
Well, okay.
What is true is that they broke the law in Pennsylvania. Right. They broke the law in other states. They rigged the election in terms of the drop boxes. Okay. And the postponing and the absentee balloting.
Different direction.
But even when he was president, though, he should have, at like a laser beam.
Okay,
he should have been He should have been outing people and fighting
Right.
back and getting attorneys and finding allies.
So
and he did none of that.
Okay, well, no, but here's the problem, right? You have a situation in which, again, coming back to exactly what the Clinton team did, they immediately set out to delegitimize his presidency, to make it toxic for anybody who wanted to go into the administration. And they did whatever they could to foment chaos within that. Now, yes, of course, he made missteps in terms of some of his hires, but by and large, he would have good people around them who the culture around them made it impossible for them to effectively
I get that, but there were still some wise people. He could have. This could have been a Mike Pence. But Jerry, this could have been a Mike Pence project.
This is what I'm saying is that when you go to, well, yes, some of this could have been Mike Pence, and Mike Pence was certainly doing some very good work while he was vice president. But my point is, when people are hounded, at all hours, when cabinet secretaries are being harassed at their homes or in restaurants, when your senior advisors are being harassed, and it's made very clear that if you go into this administration, you will never be able to find work again, or will make it very difficult for you to find work again, then you're left with fewer and fewer, right? We talked about this with the 2020 election. We know that Donald Trump should have hired Ben Ginsburg to handle the challenges of the 2020 election. In fact, Ben Ginsburg should have been involved earlier, but they made the climate so toxic that there was no way that Ben Ginsburg was ever going to go near Trump.
You're right. But my only response to that is that, well, then they've already won.
Well, okay, but right, Jerry, they did win. They won. But listen,
I'm still saying that Trump could have been smarter. You're 100% right. Everything you're saying is true, but he still could have been smarter. He could have kept his mouth shut when he had to, open it when he needed to.
Sure,
and
I get
undisciplined.
Right. I don't listen. To me, the great failure of the Trump administration was, in the end, was only not the great failure. There were other smaller failures. The great failure was that Trump and the FEC didn't do what they could to cleanse the voter rolls of dead people and people in other states moving into the 2020 election.
Trump could have. Here's what he could have done.
But no. But Jerry,
here's what he could have
done.
Hold
on. My point is this: is that I because so many good things were done during the Trump administration. And we knew Trump's personal faults and failings going into this, right? It's the line from the movie The Black Hole. Hold on. The line from the movie The Black Hole. You can't blame a pint for not being a quart. It's doing the best job that it can, just being the pint.
But however, you're making my point for me.
Yes.
Even with all of this against him, he was still able to get the Tax Cut and Jobs Act.
Right.
Even with all this against him, he was able to broker peace in the Middle East and move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Even with all of this against him, he was able to push China on its heels for the first time.
Right, and so much of that was done, with the exception of the bill, right? That the one bill you mentioned. Very little in terms of legislation was passed later on, especially after they lost both houses. Lost one house of Congress. But so much was done administratively. My point in the end is, there was, for instance, it would have been great. Donald Trump should have been able to pass an infrastructure bill. He should have been. It's something the Democrats had wanted up until the point that Donald Trump became president. But because it was Donald Trump, and the Democrats and the media would never give Donald Trump that victory, they would never do it. Immigration, right? We could have gotten some kind of an immigration.
But again, however, he had a 2-year window, even though he was crippled with the Russia hoax and with all that was against him. He did waste opportunity. He wasted time. And anyone should know by now that if you're going to get anything done, and you have both houses of Congress, you need to get it done in that first term.
But time out for a second, Jerry.
Joe Biden has made it so.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here, though. Right? Which is, when you have a Republican caucus that in and of itself can't get organized, and you have a speaker who, it turns, is at contretemps with the president and is a weak speaker and can't get his coalition in order.
But again,
Jerry, a prime example, hold on. A prime example of this, of course, is healthcare reform, right? when you have
ironically, they did it. The Trump administration with a Democratic Congress did get arguably the greatest healthcare reform in the last 60 years when they pushed through Operation Warp Speed.
Well, yes, yeah, but there's pushing through Operation Warp Speed is one thing, but in terms of the repeal of Obamacare and the replacement of Obamacare, which was a major campaign promise, you're right. They didn't get that done.
You're right. But again, I'll push back on you. Even there, the Trump administration never put forward an alternative to Obamacare.
This is
So that's on Trump.
Well, some of it's on Trump, but also some of it is on the Republicans.
But if you're, I get it.
Right. Remember, Republicans in Congress cannot agree on what the problem with healthcare is.
I get this, but the problem the problem with Trump was that he fought Paul Ryan as much as he fought Chuck Schumer. He was fighting everybody all the time. Even now, look
say that Paul Ryan was fighting Donald Trump more than Donald Trump was fighting.
But regardless, be a leader. This is the problem with Trump. He could never lead. He was always narcissistic. Everything was, I like so and so because he said something nice about me.
Right.
The guy's like an 8-year-old.
It gets into his performance last week on the CNN town hall, which we haven't discussed again.
Yeah. Let me just make one last point on this, please. Because what if I were Donald Trump and I was under siege, right? Yes. I love the old John Wayne movies, especially the Calvary movies.
I like the John Wayne Gacy movies, Jerry.
All right. Whenever in these movies, whenever the cowboys or the cavalry were in trouble, under attack, what did they do?
They
circled the wagons.
Yes, of course.
Donald Trump never circled the wagons.
Early
on, he had enough allies in the conservative media, in the Congress, and 70 million Americans. He never circled the wagons.
But Jerry, this is the issue. This gets into exactly what we're talking about with,
which is why I partly blame him for the chaos of what happened.
The Democrats and the media were doing whatever they could to make it impossible. Right. Again, it gets
they could have circled the wagons. They could have
Jerry, if you are making it impossible, if you are making it as toxic as possible, if you're out there saying that the president is a Russian asset, if you're saying that he and his top people have connections to Russia or they're lying and they're cheating, every day there's another scandal in the news.
Here's who didn't believe that and who he could have coordinated with on a weekly, if not daily basis. Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham,
right? But Jerry,
the American Greatness,
Jerry, they were all cheerleading for him.
No, but with no coordination, with no strategy, it was all tactics. It was all shotgun approach.
But on the other hand, Jerry, if you don't know where the attacks are coming from, and if you are out there screaming to the heavens that we know that this is coming from inside the deep state, and you're being constantly gaslit, no, it's not coming from the deep state. No, Comey comes in and says, no, Mr. President, you can trust me. It's a situation. Every word of yours,
Andrew Jackson, once told the Supreme Court to sit on it. During his administration, his policies towards Native Americans, Indians, and reservations was deemed unconstitutional by the courts. And Jackson said the court made its decision, let it enforce it.
Right.
Donald Trump never used the power of the bully pulpit effectively, never used the federal government, the power he had at his fingertips. He never used it effectively.
I think
never.
I think that's vastly overstating that he never used the
power. No, I'll give you one example that is so obvious that you're going to go, oh yeah. The reopening of the economy during COVID.
Well, sure. But okay, Jerry,
he never did anything to push
But Jerry, this is the problem. Again, getting into the toxification of the environment out there. Donald Trump gets out there and makes
bizarre statements.
No. He gets out there and he says, I see there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think we can start to reopen things.
Why didn't he fire Fauci? Why didn't he fire Birx? Why didn't he replace Dr. France at NIH?
Again, this gets into the toxic nature of the environment.
But again, all right. So here's the difference.
Jerry,
here's the difference. You're arguing that
Jerry. I understand your argument. Your argument, and this is what you said.
I'm saying do something. He did nothing.
You were absolutely correct in your statement yesterday. If you know you're going to get impeached, then go ahead and go
fight.
Right. The point is, he did do a lot of fighting while he was president.
But my point is, none of it was effective. None of it was smart. None of it was strategic.
I disagree with you because
give me one area, just one.
Regulation. He did exactly what he promised to do. He had 2 regulations out for every new regulation. He kept regulatory costs at less than 2% per year. He created an executive order on regulatory transparency and accountability. All of, and that had it. He appointed good people in those regulatory agencies who were doing good work. He went and put enormous pressure on various sectors within those agencies to do the administration's bidding in things like energy and the environment. Certainly did good work on labor. So there are in the areas that you and I have talked about on the substantive issues.
You're right about that. I'm just so frustrated with this idea that, well, the odds were against him, so therefore he really had no choice and couldn't really fight back. Listen, if that's the case, then why are we doing a podcast?
No, but that's just it. You are correct in that he didn't fight back well. I think you misstate it when you say that he could have more effectively, maybe he could have more effectively circled the wagons. But again, when people are being picked off here and there, right? What was the strategy with the Indians? You would circle the wagons. You would go and pick off, like any siege. You would go and pick off people. Plus, here's one of the great problems of the siege mentality.
Here it is, though. You circle the wagons because you're waiting for reinforcements.
Right.
In my mind, if Trump had more effectively circled the wagons, the reinforcements were the American people.
Yes, but his
own chaos, his own misstatements, those rambling press conferences during COVID, the dumb things he would say.
Right? Yeah, sure. And again, I can come back to and say, if Donald Trump had put out, remember, it gets into what I've said, and I'm not going to throw the person under the bus, though I probably should at some point. Right? It's emblematic in this instance. Donald Trump could have shut down the entire debate about masks and this issue of masks being some kind of political litmus test. If he had come out with, if the Trump campaign had said, something, we're going to spend $10 million, we're going to give every Trump supporter for free a red and white MAGA mask and a blue and white Trump 2020 mask. And if he'd come out on stage wearing a red and white MAGA mask, no one would ever have taken pictures of it. We would never be talking about masks.
Make America healthy again.
Right. Exactly. And I made that suggestion to a senior Trump advisor and was unfriended that day by that Trump advisor. And obviously it never happened. Yes.
I guess part of my frustration in all of this is that, yes, Trump did good things, but, as you know, I'm a football coach, a baseball coach. I used to teach high school. I would grade tests and quizzes. Trump, on balance, his presidency, his presence on the national stage is a failure. And we need to do everything to move past him.
But okay, yeah, I agree with that. But Jerry, let me just say this much, right? It comes down to, and this is the point that I was making with the anecdote I just told. When you have made it impossible for anybody good to come in and do a senior position, you get shitty advice from people. I'm sorry about that, Geraldine. I apologize.
But part of that too is that, he might have been able to, Bill Barr is a serious person, and he'll work after this, and others in his administration. The problem is that those who got hounded and can't get employed now, we're for the most part morons.
No, I don't listen. See, I disagree there. I think Kirstjen Nielsen was not a moron. She was a very respected.
She did not conduct herself well. She was caught flat-footed. She didn't have good responses.
But on the other hand, Jerry, she was a serious Homeland Security professional who should very much be able to get work afterwards.
Right.
And yet, you're right.
But
One
she-
of the
but
things
she-
she was
but she
very much
failed-
guilty
but
of. Hold
she-
on. One of
yeah.
the things she was very much guilty of was not being someone who was used to being in the public eye.
Yeah.
And so certainly, was not able to deal with that.
But again,
well.
but here's part of the problem too. When you bring in Bannon, when you bring in Manafort, when your campaign director is guilty of embezzling millions of dollars
Sure.
of campaign funds, when you surround yourself with a way past his prime and obviously mental acuity not up to standard, Rudy Giuliani, when
Right.
you have Jenna Ellis as your attorney, what I'm saying is you're right. Good people were intimidated not to join, not to help.
Right.
But even that was partly his fault because he brought in
But
such
Jerry,
bad people.
Well, okay, but on the other hand, sure. I mean, we could, but none of us thought that Mike Flynn was a bad choice. Going
Alex Azar today is doing quite well, and he was
Right.
the HHS secretary.
Sure.
Scott Gottlieb today is doing quite well. He was the FDA commissioner. You can go down the line. Bill Barr,
Right. But as you just said, Jerry, on the other hand, Scott Gottlieb and Alex Azar, they didn't come up with an Obamacare bill to give to the president to send forward. But
it's true. But my point is that if you were a serious person and you conducted yourself well in your job, there should have been more Alex Azars. There should have been more Eric Hargans. More.
Sure, but on the other hand, you've got the Tom Prices of the world.
Tom Price is doing well.
Ryan Zinke, but they were hounded out of office.
But they're working and they're doing well.
Sure. Well, I don't know what Ryan Zinke's up to, frankly. David Bernhardt is a prime example. David Bernhardt's doing well, former Interior Secretary. Now is a book out. We should get him on the show.
But you see what I mean?
Your show.
Personnel is politics. I don't think Donald Trump did a great job. I don't think he surrounded himself in his inner circle. My goodness, his daughter and his son-in-law were his two closest advisors.
Sure,
that's crazy.
Okay,
that's crazy.
Listen. I will. But on the other hand, once again, we keep saying on the one hand and on the other hand. But on the other hand, frankly, Kushner and Ivanka didn't really make any bad missteps. I don't think Trump Jr. made any bad missteps in terms of policy while they were doing their jobs. It's optically not great, but on the other hand, it's
again, he should have.
Right, he invited
when you bring in your nutty sons,
but on the other
and
hand,
you bring in your daughter who has no portfolio whatsoever. Kushner, there's an argument. But even Kushner, inherited his wealth from his family. It just looks horrible.
Well, no, okay, but you're talking about the optics side of it. But on the other, right, and then on the other end, Jerry, if again,
I couldn't tell you anything that
coming around
Ivanka did. Is it Ivanka?
Ivanka.
What wonderful policy
she was working. She was working on trying to find a way to push back and create a new Republican conservative response on family medical leave.
Failed. And what a dumb topic. What a stupid idea. You're right. Now I remember. I remember her doing this, thinking this is idiotic.
Jerry, time out for a second. Hold on. Again, we're talking politics here, right? We know that one of the most important constituencies in terms of cobbling together to win an election is suburban soccer moms who are increasingly working. What we don't want, hold on, time out, Jerry,
are not sending their kids off to public daycare. It was stupid.
Well, no, time out, Jerry.
The whole thing was dumb.
No, it's not, Jerry. I'm going to disagree with you vehemently here, because you have working moms who are trying to figure out exactly how to deal with daycare and after school programs. What we don't want is a Democrat response. We don't want an Obamacare version of family medical leave, which is what they've been trying to do. But what did they do? They brought together a bunch of different stakeholders, the right people in the room to talk about this.
When you are using the other team's vernacular and language, you have already lost.
But unfortunately, Jerry, we have a Family and Medical Leave Act that's already on the book, so it's called Family and Medical Leave.
So what you do is you offer alternatives. You use language like private sector, like little platoons. You use Burkean language.
Okay.
I'm glad you mentioned this.
I'm sorry, but
time,
suburban soccer moms are not going to want to know about little platoons.
All right, so here's
want to know.
So here's the second thing. See, this is maybe part of the you concede the language, concede the issue.
Jerry, I'm conceding
the government has no
business
because
that's the act that's on the books. It's the act that's on the books. So unfortunately, yes, I would not want to talk about the Endangered Species Act. I would want to talk about a Private Conservation Act, but unfortunately, what we have is the Endangered Species Act on the books. So I'm going to talk about endangered species. We're going to talk about waters of the United States because unfortunately, that's the language within the Clean Water Act statute.
And maybe that's part of the problem as to why we haven't won a major policy victory in 100 years is because we're using their language.
But Jerry, when the bills are already on the books, right? Or, the Patriot Act. I mean, unfortunately, the Patriot Act is the Patriot Act, and we gotta work to either amend or repeal that.
I had forgotten what she had done. You raised it. I remember at the time being on WBL radio, being incredibly critical of her language, of the meetings,
but Jerry,
the whole
point
thing.
Is when you have a segment of the population, the independent voter, the suburban college-educated woman, who you need to win, and who your father is already behind the eight ball because of the media's constant harping on his apparent misogyny. Coming up with a strategy.
So you cave on
You don't cave. That's the whole point. Is you're not caving. You're trying to find a solution.
Well, I can't recall anything except for government interference that she offered.
No, but that's exactly it. It's not about government interference, right? The way the Family Medical Leave Act is written right now is that essentially you're ordered to do X, Y, and Z, but there's nothing in terms of comp time or flex time. In fact, the Democrats don't want comp time or flex time to give sort of greater flexibility to employers in terms of how they offer some kind of leave or how they calculate it.
I know. Look, we're off this tangent on family leave. Let me say this. Whether or not you like what she was doing, it was stupid to have her to bring your daughter into the White House.
Well, okay,
and that's part of the reason why it made it easy.
But again, as I said, it gets into optics. But if you're,
you just said optics matter. You said so. Family leave. That whole thing is optics, so it matters.
Well, no, it's politics.
Ivanka Trump doesn't matter.
It's politics in terms of
it's politics too when you bring your daughter into the White House.
Yes, but on the other hand, when you're faced with a series of choices and you are very limited in who you feel you can trust in terms of your advisors, you're going to turn to the people that are not going to turn around and pull a Jim Comey on you or listen. You want to talk about a bad hire, Jerry? What's her name from the Donald Trump's The Apprentice? The woman who didn't win. What's her name?
I know you're talking about.
I want to say Osiris, but that's not it.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
Omarosa, right? Bringing in Omarosa, that was bad, right?
You're right. It's funny that I wasn't overjoyed with Pence as the VP pick.
Unlike me,
right? I really
was overjoyed.
Yeah. But that being said, on a lot of these personnel and optic issues and staffing issues, what he could have done was had a kitchen cabinet that was kept away from the public scrutiny and really put Pence, a Washington insider, a former governor, former congressman, vice president, respected in conservative circles, right? And not yet hated totally by the mainstream media. Put him in charge of recruiting talent. Part of the problem. Look, I know you have too. I've been at a couple of these meetings they're having in DC these days about not making the same mistakes that Trump made in his first couple of weeks and months in office. You have Trump alumni saying, privately at least, maybe some are saying it publicly, that he really screwed up on personnel, that he was slow to act, that he was slow to remove people, that it wasn't that the administrative state and the staffing was never a priority for him.
Well,
and ironically, this is what came back to haunt him. Look, right now, the Heritage Foundation is aligned and allied with 50 other stakeholder groups with one purpose: staffing.
Right, but remember,
Staffing
Jerry,
the next GOP administration.
and I get that. I mean, listen, I think some of it was slow because you're right. They were behind the eight ball, and they were not, DC insiders sort of coming in there. And
Sure.
and you had a lot of outsiders coming in, and that's going to create the curve. But remember,
the funny thing is,
hold on, Joe.
His transition team was quite good.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is it from November to January? You and I were very surprised at the good people that were coming.
He had
in
a very good
transition
team.
But the other part of it, of course, was no
one on the transition
hold on, Jerry.
team.
There was the fifth column within these administrative agencies. It hasn't been published yet. I just had a conversation with David Bernhardt, who was Deputy Secretary of the Interior and then Secretary of the Interior when Ryan Zinke had to resign. And he tells stories in his new book, and unfortunately I don't have it here. I wish I had it with me. He's got a new book about the administrative state, talking about the recalcitrance on the part of and the lack of cooperation on the part of folks within the agencies to follow the lead of the political leaders who have every right to engage in discretionary policy. And I told a story with him, and I'll tell it here now. For instance, somebody that I went to William and Mary with, who made a very public resignation from her job at the Interior Department because she vehemently disagreed with the Interior Secretaries and the president's approach to climate policy and how that was implementing her ability to protect antiquities. Now, it is within the discretionary power of any agency head to change it. But when you have agency personnel dragging their feet, when you have agency personnel leaking information, when you have, frankly, disloyal Trump appointees leaking information.
But you're right about this. But then again, here's the thing, right? I'd make the argument that if the EPA's business was slowed because Trump got bogged down in a bunch of fights, it would have been fine. So if I were Donald
Jerry,
Trump,
okay,
if I were Donald Trump,
we're talking about two things. We're talking about
he never. Yes, he asked the state's attorneys, whatever,
U.S.
to
attorneys.
resign. U.S. attorneys but he never. Look, he never did it. Trump never fired anyone in the administrative state. He didn't do it.
Okay,
he could have,
but he didn't. No, the president doesn't see. That's the thing, is right. The president doesn't have the power.
Any political appointee he could have fired.
Oh, political appointees certainly,
yes.
And I don't know. I don't remember, Jerry. I don't know offhand. I don't remember offhand if he fired anybody or not. My point in the end is you made a statement about the slowing of the gears. You want the gears to be slowed when they're working to grow the size of government. But when you're trying to shrink the size of government and the impact of government and people, you want the government to move with a little bit of swiftness.
Sure.
And when you have agency personnel who are slow walking the ability to shrink the size and scope of government power because it impacts their ability to be mandarins in their own area, that's a problem.
He should have walked in day one and said anyone and everyone he could have fired in every agency should have been fired. Boom. Everyone.
Yeah, but again, so the president only has the power. The president only has the power to fire the folks that are political appointees. He doesn't have the power to fire others.
What I just said was anyone with whom he had power to fire, he should have fired them.
But all those folks, I mean, with the exception of the U.S. attorneys, all of those folks resigned anyway. They were out of jobs. I mean, that's just it.
There were a lot of people who refused to leave.
I don't know.
I remember that.
Not if they were political appointees.
Yes. There were political appointees who refused to leave. Absolutely,
Jerry,
there were.
All right, I have to go back.
Go back and look.
I would
trust me, verify, because I remember having these conversations and on the air and thinking, well, this person at this agency says they're not leaving. They have no choice. And what happened was, again, I can't fight this fight. I got to go fight this fight.
No, but if there was an isolated incident, I don't recall it.
Do you really think that Trump cleaned house to the extent that he was able to?
Well,
his own people said he didn't do it.
Jerry, I think Donald Trump, I think there is an expectation and there is precedent that when a new administration changes hands, the old people leave. Now, that being said, Jerry, the issue of folks burrowing into agencies who are political appointees I'm sure that Donald Trump didn't do as great a job, or these agency heads didn't do as great a job to ensure that folks who've been
let me throw this
Obama,
idea
hold on, Obama era administrative appointees didn't burrow into agencies.
The Clinton administration was brilliant. They started the whole encouraging political appointees to go career track.
Right.
It happened proactively during the Clinton years. Again, it just shows you how the left is brilliant. They knew 30 years ago that the fight was going to be the administrative state. And so what they did was they changed tactics on us, and they began to put all their people in the administrative state.
Well,
regardless of, but let me throw this idea at you.
Yeah.
Let's say we get one more chance at it. In 2024, Ron DeSantis wins the presidency.
Right.
We know this guy's a fighter.
Yeah.
We know that he's willing to put his force behind legislation. He's done it in Florida. We know that he's willing to fight back against the mainstream media and corporate America, right? We know this. So let's say he wins. And with that, there's some coattails, and the Republicans win the Senate back and they keep the House. If I'm Speaker McCarthy, if I'm Leader Tim Scott, because McConnell has to go. Although, McConnell deserves a hero award for the judiciary and the judges, but regardless,
we can't ignore Donald Trump's record on judges. But go ahead.
Right, yeah. But here's the thing. My first bill, HR1, is the Administrative State Term Limit Act.
Okay.
Where no one, obviously, you have to grandfather people in, but moving forward, you get a maximum of 3 4-year terms as a federal administrative employee, and you're forced to retire after 12. And you know what? And I'll spend money here. And you retire with full benefits, and if you serve your entire 12 years, you get benefits, you get your retirement, etc., as if you worked for 25 years. But or make it 8 years, 2 terms. Like, why are we always talking about term? Why are we term limiting? Why do we want to term limit members of Congress who are elected, but we won't term limit bureaucrats?
I will agree with you if again, sort of in the terms of the compromise, if part of what you're talking about is also we're not going to refill your position when you're gone. We're going to evaluate.
Well, it depends. Well, yes, you evaluate. I mean, you might have to refill it.
Right. Well, I agree. Yeah. But on the other hand, if we're using it as a tool to shrink the size and scope, see, this also gets into something else that Donald Trump tried to do and was roundly castigated again with the leftist press, was that Donald Trump at one point threatened to, or was talking about, I'm not even say threatened because they called it a threat. Donald Trump was talking about moving the headquarters of the Interior Department out of Washington, D.C. and putting it out in Denver.
I think it's a horrible idea, by the way.
Well, okay. So why is that a horrible idea?
Because you take a major agency, put it somewhere where there are private businesses and mom and pop shops and Main Street, and then that area becomes dependent upon this agency. It's spreading the poison.
That's a trade-off here. I think on the other hand, if you have agency officials who are living and working, where they're actually having to deal with the folks who are dealing with their policy implications, and more to the point, you make it easier for folks who are having to redress their grievances to interact with the agency.
All right, let me ask you this: does that work in Maryland? Because the very radical members of the Assembly and the state Senate live among their neighbors, and it's the most radical. California. Do those? It doesn't work.
Listen, I've said this before.
Government's a virus.
Right. No. But remember, right? I mean, that's it. You make my point for me. You have a situation in which when you create legislative districts that are like that, you make it so that it's completely skewed in one direction or another, right? That's gerrymandering.
Right. But if you take a major government agency like the EPA and you put it, say, in Florida, or you take the Interior and you put it in Utah, what you're doing is that you're creating a constituency for the Democrats, and then Utah goes blue, and then Florida goes blue.
Yeah, but if you're in a place, but if you put it in a place like Colorado, which is already blue, then it's not that big a deal. The point is, Jerry, Donald Trump was trying.
So I agree. I believe the entire federal government should be moved to California.
Well, okay,
Yes,
but
I favor that.
how about not the entire? Okay, I like that, but but also the other part of it is, how about you spread it around so that you and I've talked about getting captured by the system, where
Listen,
you have folks who bounce around from one agency to another.
Here's my problem with doing that, right? So
Get rid of the lobbyists.
California, has seen a great diaspora over the last 10 and 20 years. Many of that diaspora has gone to Colorado. Andrew, you and I both remember when Colorado was a solid Republican state, right? But what happened? California moved to Colorado, right? This is happening everywhere, where they're leaving Illinois, leaving Colorado, leaving California, leaving New York, Maryland, and they're turning red states blue. The same thing would happen. It would be accelerated if we moved the federal government out of the DC Capitol complex and put it in the country.
He was specifically talking about the Interior Department, right? It's I think it's different with other agencies that have when you have an Interior Department where the bulk of its management is west of the Colorado Rockies. You're talking about one very particular parochial set of circumstances. It also gets to the lobbying class, right? Remember, this is a lot of what we've been talking about is the cocktail party circuit. You find ways to eviscerate the cocktail party circuit and do
or you contain it.
Well, okay, but how do you contain the cocktail
by keeping it in DC, New York City, San Francisco, and
so then you just perpetuate the cycle, is what you're saying. That's the problem here.
No, the problem is that they're smart. They're taking over. Look, Andrew, we're not winning anywhere. So why do we want the blue disease to be spread to where we're winning?
Okay, because it's two different ways of looking at it, right? On the one hand, we're not winning. Part of it is because of the concentrated power in Washington, D.C. So you try to break up that power, right? So, listen, it gets into, and this is now me just thinking out loud, right? The op-ed that I had, and thank you very much for helping me get it posted this morning on FERC, the Federal Energy and Regulatory Commission, and this organization, the Energy Foundation, that is spending $198 million. I'm sorry, spending. It took in revenues in 2020 of $198 million that it's then spreading around everywhere. This is, we talk about why we're losing. This is why we're losing. Because you have entities that are spending nearly $200 million. Sorry, maybe it was $189 million, $188 million. But nearly $200 million on pushing green energy proposals. If you make it maybe a little bit more difficult for the folks to lobby for that stuff in Washington, D.C.
Right. But here's my final. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't think it's smart to push out the bureaucracy to other places.
Okay, Jerry, the point is, it's not about whether or not it's smart. Again, and you could talk about the optics side of it. The point is, it was, Donald Trump trying to put some reformatory pressure on the Interior Department, where you had recalcitrant employees who were, who were not engaging, not following the discretionary policies of the Trump administration. So one of the things you can do is you say, something, maybe we'll move you all out to Denver, or we'll move you all out to Wyoming. Or we'll move you wherever, and that way, maybe we'll get some different people who are working for this.
The only way I think that would work is if you actually move it to Puerto Rico or move it to Guam.
Okay, we'll move it to Guam. Well, the problem is, of course, Guam might tip over if you move them all there.
Inside joke. A congressman once said that the island would tip over. But let me just say that here's my last word on this issue, because we're all over the place. You and I remember the 70s and the 80s in New York City.
Yes.
We remember the cities are ungovernable. And then you have the Manhattan Institute, and you have fixing broken windows policing. And then you have a politician, Rudy Giuliani, but others, Bill Bratton, even David Dinkins, before Giuliani, started to implement fixing broken windows. And it was such an immediate success that Brooklyn became a safe place to live, that parts of the Bronx became Sobro.
Yeah.
The South Bronx became, because the South Bronx is only 4 subway stops from Manhattan, people started to move to the South Bronx. It was an amazing urban renaissance. Amazing. I witnessed it. You witnessed it. It was real. businesses came back. Now this was, this is also economic development. It was also taking regs away and taxes away with crime control, but it worked. And then what happened? People started to move back to New York City.
Right.
And all of these hipsters and progressives started to buy in and move to neighborhoods that were once blighted.
Yes.
And then what did all those hipsters and progressives do?
They pushed.
They voted for
right.
Bill de Blasio.
Right.
And they voted for Eric Adams. And now New York, part of my language, is now a shit hole. And it is. I've been up there. New York is a horrible, no good place. Think of this situation with the subway, where this former Marine hero protects his fellow citizens, and the progressive Alvin Bragg the prosecutor, is bringing charges against him. The fact is that good policy changes. And then the liberals, progressives, like a disease, like a virus, invade, and then they vote for the bad policies.
Well, sure. I mean, again, it gets into all of these things. We talk about border policy and the changes to any society when folks who do not share the values of the people who are living within a particular society move in, and those values come into conflict. Right.
And also kind of a top 10 of what's on our mind this week, or my mind this week. The fact that, reports, test scores are out. American middle schoolers have no idea about American civics, American history, American culture. And that's frightening. This is part of the reason why the horde at our southern border is so scary, not because immigration is bad. Immigration isn't that positive. The problem is that when you have millions upon millions of people entering the country illegally and legally, but with no control and all chaotic, what happens is they can't be assimilated. And so we're literally changing not just the demographic of the country, but the culture of the country.
That's what I'm saying here. It gets into exactly what you're saying. When you get folks moving from blue states into red states and start making blue state demands on those red states,
right?
It changes the policy, it changes the outlook, and it destroys everything. Listen, maybe all of the mythos. Can I digress for a second?
Sure.
I was about to talk about. You were talking about things that are on your mind. Was watching cartoons. I'll say it was Saturday. It may not have been Saturday, but I like watching my Saturday morning cartoons, Joe.
Me too.
Now that I'm no longer on WBAL.
I love it. I
get the chance. Used to be I get off the air and I watch the Bowery Boys. But TCM stopped putting the Bowery Boys on. Jerry, do you remember this gets into everything that you're saying. Do you remember a Bugs Bunny cartoon where Bugs Bunny's nephew Clyde is studying for a history test? And Bugs Bunny shares with him all kinds of history, and he gives him all these wrong facts, and Clyde comes back with a dunce cap on because he failed his test. Yeah, because Betsy Ross got the idea for the flag because Bugs Bunny stepped on a rake, or the electric blankets were shorting out. So I'm watching this cartoon, and it was frankly, it's apparently not regarded as.
By the way, Looney Tunes, Clyde, his name is not. So there's Bugs Bunny. His name is Clyde Bunny.
Clyde Bunny, yes. Clyde Bunny is his nephew.
Yeah.
So the cartoon opens up, Jerry, with the sale of Manhattan from the Indians to the Dutch.
Right.
And you see these massive teepees on the island, right? Instead of the modern skyscrapers.
Right.
And then Bugs Bunny says that he sold the island. The Indians sold the island for a song. And you have the Indian run off with yelling about how he bought the island with sheet music for a song. So I'm watching this cartoon, and I distinctly remember the big canoes in the Hudson River or the East River, and I remember the big teepees. And I watched this cartoon, and Bugs Bunny says something about New York, and then it immediately cuts to Benjamin Franklin. They cut out the New York being sold to the Indians portion of this. Oh, really? And I sat there. I said, "Did I imagine that? Was there more to this?" And again, it's a form of gaslighting, which again we've just been talking about. And I went up and looked, and sure enough, about 20 years ago, ABC and the WB and a handful of other outlets, they made a decision to excise the Indian portion from this cartoon, this Bugs Bunny cartoon. So now you don't see it anywhere. My point is, in the end, I was going to say something about maybe the Native Americans were right about Americans not, about the white man not living in balance with his community, as evidenced by what happens when blue staters go into red states and sort of decimate things. Sorry.
But it's funny in Montgomery County, Maryland. It's a very rich liberal county. One of the few areas during the Great Recession that actually gained wealth, didn't lose wealth. But there are signs popping up all over the place about property taxes. Apparently, the Democratic county executive and the Democratic council they're about to hike significantly property taxes, and now all these people are outraged. And I told Erica, my wife Erica, as we're driving, seeing these signs, I'm like, well, of course, this is who you voted for,
right?
And again, it's everyone. It's everyone's outraged. Democrats, what few Republicans there are. But my point is, you voted for this,
right? This is what.
So why are you surprised?
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yeah, so my question to you is, why is there this disconnect? Because people always seem surprised that that Mayor Brandon Scott, Democrat mayor of Baltimore City, is doing nothing about youth crime. I'm shocked at this. I'm shocked that the public schools are failing. That in cities across the country, absenteeism is now the norm. People aren't showing. Public schools are failed. I'm shocked that public schools are failing.
Jerry,
I'm shocked that taxes are going up.
That's just it, right? Now we've come full circle, right? Which is this issue of, folks being lied to, right? As you said, they're stupid because they're smart, because they're not paying attention to the nitty gritty, details. We know that all politics is personal. Folks are motivated by what's around them. We know that finally, in terms of the educational side of it, that's one of these issues where, and some of it has to do with the transgender policy as well, but on the educational side of things, this is one of the things that is a motivating factor for folks to get interested. And then it becomes a question of, a question of a DeSantis or whomever.
But what is it? What is it that I just don't get it? Like I had a conversation, again, it's anecdotal, but I think this is characteristic of this whole problem. I talked to someone just recently, a family member, who was complaining about it was complaining about their electric bill and complaining about gas taxes.
Right.
I mean, like, and putting the blame on Con Edison, a public utility, and putting the blame on big bad ExxonMobil. And I asked her, who did you vote for?
Yeah.
And in this case, they voted for Governor Murphy, a Democrat governor of New Jersey, and they voted for Joe Biden.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. What did you?
But
when Joe Biden promised to get rid of the oil, to shut down oil, to stop drilling. What did you think was going to happen?
This person was, to use your terms from the early part of the show, this person was bewildered.
Yes.
Like, didn't even make the connection. And I asked, well, why did you vote for Murphy? Well, because Republicans hate gay people.
Right.
What?
Yeah. That's
why did you vote for Biden? Because Donald Trump's evil.
Right. And Jerry, this comes down to, again, right, the press not doing its job, whether a lack of curiosity or because they have an agenda, and the demagoguery of anybody who is raising questions. Hey, I want to add this, Jerry, real quick, because as we're winding down, you talk about Montgomery County. I am speaking in Montgomery County next week, Jerry. I don't even know if you know this.
I don't know this.
I am speaking to I think it's the Chevy Chase Republican Women's Group. Check this.
I don't even think that group exists.
Well, it does, and they've invited me to speak. I am speaking on Wednesday, May 24th at That's Amore Restaurant. That's at 15201 Shady Grove Road in Rockville, Maryland, Jerry. Going to be in your backyard or your front yard, however you look at it.
I love you, Andrew. I have no idea why you would do this.
What do you mean? Why wouldn't I do this?
Because there is, effectively speaking, there is no women Republican Chevy Chase.
Sure there are.
Really?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, but Jerry, isn't this the point? that you need to have your Republican women, your Republican groups who are well informed about what's going on in the world and how they can get active on things.
That's true.
And
You're
they
right.
can
I'm
say, they can say, you know,
I'm a curmudgeon.
I know you are. I know you are. So that's why.
I'm just, yeah, you're
and
right.
Much
you're
the
right.
Same way
you're
that
right.
you should never get between Andrew Langer and a microphone.
Yeah.
You should never get between Andrew Langer and a podium.
I'm telling
you.
Why
am I going? Because they asked me, Jerry.
I really in my head fight all the time about just, again, giving it all up, pulling a Seton Motley and just moving somewhere tropical. And, you know,
right.
We're at a point now where it's better for us to go live in some well, secluded third world country.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to go to a third world country. I would certainly want the country that.
Well, what is Belize? What is Belize?
I believe that they would call that it's not developed. I think it's in a transitional state.
All right. Then
right, but what's the problem? The problem, of course, is right with Belize and Costa Rica and other nations like this. If more blue staters move to Costa Rica and Belize, all of a sudden it's no longer there. I knew a guy who lived on one of the islands off of Honduras for many years. It wasn't this the plot of that Harrison Ford movie, The Mosquito Coast?
I didn't see it.
Yeah. Anyway,
yes. But it's funny because I hear, you know, I kind of read all the time. There are parts of the Caribbean, parts of sections of Mexico where Americans retirees are flocking to, because it's you can get a beautiful casa,
yes,
with multiple bedrooms and ocean views for nickels on the dollar.
Here's the thing that I always come back to, Jerry.
Yeah.
Unless my family was all going to move with me.
Well, yeah, of course.
That's the problem. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You
well, I have been secretly, but not so secretly, because I told the whole family this. I've been devising ways for us to move back to New Jersey.
Yes.
I think New Jersey's also a blue state hellhole, but at least my family's there.
Right. That's the thing.
Maryland is becoming unlivable. It's becoming a state where it's anyway, difficult to live.
This is a conversation for you and I have offline, because I would say I can't see that happening so long as your daughters are living and working in DC.
This is true, but again, the one daughter is dating a guy from Jersey.
Yeah.
And the other daughter is dating a guy who works for a very prestigious think tank. And I happen to have very good connections with a think tank up in Manhattan.
I know.
So I could arrange for things for my daughters to move back up there too. And Liam's in third grade, and Grace. The time to do this would be in 1 year, because in 1 year, in 1 year, Gracie enters high school, Maddie enters college, Liam goes into fifth grade. Claire will have graduated. Bridget too. Bridget has a great job working in public affairs, but it's 100% virtual.
The great thing is that if Jerry and I continue this podcast in this way, remarkably, even if Jerry moves to New Jersey, his studio will look the same.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I get that. There was whole other thing I was going to say about the moving thing. Anyway, it doesn't.
And there's nothing. At least I moved back up Jersey to where I grew up. I got the Bronx right there. I got Woodlawn.
I can finally do a show from McLean Avenue for St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, we got to do that.
Jerry, you're on Sunday.
I am on Sunday. We didn't talk about this, but I had to do corporate training, and it was so offensive. And it was so wrong.
Yeah, you didn't tell me about this.
No, and I'm thinking about this. I'm trying to wrap my head around how to talk about this on the show on Sunday, because what happens if the anti-harassment training videos are in and of themselves harassment?
Listen, I think that is a good question to ask HR, Jerry.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So I'm a person of faith, and I don't believe in indulging other people's religious fanaticism. I think you can have your faith, but you shouldn't be allowed to force your faith on others.
Sure.
So I'm a Christian, but I'm not going to require that my producer on the radio show accepts Christ as her Lord and Savior to work with me, right?
Yes.
That would be inappropriate.
Yes.
So why is it that I am forced to recognize the pronouns or the gender expression of those who are not that pronoun and are not that gender?
And
that is them forcing their religiosity on me.
Sure, right. But
and why hasn't there been a court case about this?
Well, you'd have to find the right plaintiff, Jerry. You could be that.
I found one case. What is it called, Andrew? The EEOC or the
the Equal Employment Opportunity.
Right. There's one case where a woman or a person, I don't know if it's a woman or a man, refused.
We wouldn't know anymore.
Well, this person refused to take corporate training as a on the grounds that it violated her religious liberty, because religion is a protected class.
Yes.
And the EEOC found against her.
Yeah.
Because there were state laws that required this training, and it put the business in a position where it could not conduct business if it broke the state law and federal law, and also accommodated this person. So this person was fired.
Then you turn around and you would have to challenge the state law, and the federal law on First Amendment grounds, and that
didn't happen.
That's the issue, and this is where it all gets.
I did draft an email to my supervisor, but I never sent it.
Well, see, Jerry,
because I was in a very angry mood when I wrote it.
This explains. What day did this happen, Jerry?
I did it Friday. The 15th was when it was due. So
got it. You did it the very last minute. Yeah, that would have been the 15th was Monday.
I did on Monday.
That it now explains why you were in a foul mood when I talked to you on Monday.
Yeah. But again, this
Sunday.
I leave you with that thought. Like, why is it that it's wrong for me to force someone I work with?
Because again, this is where the law is a follower of the prevailing wisdom. You and I both know that the lack of religion, this kind of atheism, is a form of religion in and of itself, and yet it's not generally recognized.
I'm going to go, to the extent that our podcast is public, it is public. Yeah. I will never, ever engage in this pronoun issue. Right. I will not call a her him or a him her. I will not do it.
Well, we've talked about standing up and saying.
I will never do it.
So more about this on Sunday. I'm sure you're going to figure out how to talk about it.
I am. I just might as well. Yes. Because it's an important issue. Because I think a lot of Christians and a lot of people of faith, Muslims and Orthodox Jewish people and other people of faith, they're caught in this. They're forced to go along. I tell you the truth. If at the end of this training, I had to sign something that said, I somehow had to.
Or you take an oath.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done it.
Right.
But that was, I
think that they would. I think that that's where they sort of run up into this thing where if they don't sort of make you. They're making you express the magical belief and make the incantation, but they're not making you sort of sign away your beliefs in blood.
Right.
Which is the difference here.
But that day is coming, of course.
Yeah. 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Jerry. It's podcast.
7 to 10.
Your Alfredo Ortiz interview.
Oh yeah, and did I put you? Has your Alfredo Ortiz piece come out?
No, it hasn't. Not yet.
All right, because I want to put that up at Absolutely. Real clear policy. Yeah, so Jerry Rogers, the Jerry Rogers Show, Sunday, 7 to 10 a.m. on WBAL. I had my mom on for Mother's Day, and my sister and my wife.
Know that, but there you go. That's great.
We surprise called them.
Very nice. That's good.
Anyway, but the cool thing
on the air.
Yeah, so Erica was out yesterday, and someone said to her, "Were you on the radio on Sunday?" She was like, "Yes, my husband called." Your husband's Jerry Rogers. They didn't put the connection together. So it's funny how someone heard Erica together,
Jerry.
Yeah,
it's the same last name. I am in for Larry O'Connor next Friday, the 26th.
Excellent. That is very good news.
Yeah, speaking in Chevy Chase on the 24th. So go and check that out. That's actually speaking in Rockville. At That's Amore restaurant.
Don't go back to Rockville.
Yes.
REM.
Yeah, 15201 Shady Grove Road in Rockville, Maryland. New lunch hour podcast dropped this week. Now I can't remember the gentleman's name who was on it with me, which is just fantastic. But go and check those out.
I hope someone doesn't get that address and call the restaurant and complain that Republicans, hate women or hate gay people.
Oh, I'm sure that's coming.
You shouldn't have.
See, right? But Jerry, it's called That's Amore Restaurant, so presumably they would say no. Maybe you should love a little bit more and hate a little bit less.
Yes.
Again, thank you all very much for the milestone. Recommend this to your friends. Recommend this to your family members, your family members' friends, your friends' family members. I'm Andrew Langer. Oh, Jerry, what do you want people to say? What do you want people to do?
Well, do something that's almost impossible in this environment. Find the truth, plant your feet, and stand firm. God bless you.
Have a great week, everybody. Have fun, and please stay safe.